This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. There's more trouble brewing for Hunter Biden. The Russian Defense Ministry held a news conference today in Moscow. Russia said the U.S. government spent more than $200 million on the operation of a network of more than 30 biological research laboratories in Ukraine. Plague and anthrax pathogens were among the deadly toxins stored in some of the facilities. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the U.S. removed materials from the labs when Russian troops entered Ukraine. Now today, the Russian Defense Ministry said that it is in possession of Hunter Biden's emails regarding the funding of biological laboratories in Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry says that they have the materials in front of them now to present to the public. The Tass news agency reported that, quote, according to Igor Kirillov, chief of the Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Defense Forces of the Russian Armed Forces, the published correspondence indicates that the true goals of the Pentagon in Ukraine are far from scientific. As this is the quote, as we're seeing it right now, from the Tass news agency. So let's get into this story. We have a video from the press conference. Now, we have no English subtitles in this video. This is the raw video from the Russian press conference. Doc Burkhardt and I will present to you an English translation of the Russian news report. I'm sorry, but there will be a lot of written text on our screen today. I don't have another way to convey to you the stunning information that was reported today in Moscow involving the son of the President of the United States of America. Again, here is a portion of the unedited video from the Russian news conference today where they were talking about Hunter Biden's involvement in the biological research laboratories in Ukraine. Again, there are no English subtitles in this video.
Перед вами переписка сына действующего президента США с сотрудниками управления по снижению угрозы Минобороны США, ДИТРА, и подрядных организаций Пентагон на Украине. Наличие указанных материалов подтверждают западные СМИ. Содержание писем показывает, что Хантер Байден сыграл важную роль в создании финансовой возможности проведения работ с патогеном на территории Украины, обеспечив привлечение средств для компаний Black & Twitch и Metabiota. Опубликованная переписка свидетельствует о том, что истинные цели Пентагона на Украине далеки от научных. Так, в одном из писем вице-президент Метабиоты отмечает, что деятельность компании будет направлена на обеспечение культурно-экономической независимости Украины от России, что довольно странно для биотехнической компании.
Well, as you can discern watching that video, even though we don't speak Russian, obviously they're talking about Hunter Biden. They have copies of his emails, and the military officer was explaining what the Russians have learned so far about the Biden family's involvement in the U.S.-funded biological research laboratories in Ukraine. A big story today in Russia, but I promise you, nobody in America is going to talk about it except True News. Now, we're going to do our best today to break it down. Again, as I said in the introduction, there's just going to be a lot of text on the screen. I don't have another way to present all of the information. And what we're going to show you today is only a portion of the information that was released today. We probably could do several hours today based on the information that was presented in Moscow. So let's go through it. Doc Burkhardt is here with me, and we'll start with the first quote from the Russian news report.
Well, the Russian Defense Ministry has correspondence from the son of U.S. President Hunter Biden with employees of the U.S. Department of Defense Threat Reduction Office and Pentagon contractors in Ukraine, confirming that he played an important role in creating a financial opportunity to work with pathogens in Ukraine. And that was announced by Igor Kirillov, Chief of the Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Protection Forces of the RF Armed Forces.
And so if you watched True News yesterday, you heard Doc and I talk about a company called Metabiota.
Yes.
Started by a man named Nathan Wolf, who just happens to have been an associate of Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
What a small world, Doc.
Yes.
So you're going to see in this next slide, you're going to see the name of Metabiota showing up in the Russian press conference today. Before you, this is the Russian, was he a general?
Yes.
The Russian general. He says, before you, he's talking about to the news reporters, before you is the correspondence of the son of the current U.S. president with employees of the U.S. Department of Threat Reduction Office and Pentagon contractors in Ukraine. The presence of these materials is confirmed by the Western media. The content of the letters shows that Hunter Biden played an important role in creating the financial opportunity to work with pathogens on the territory of Ukraine, having raised funds for Black and Veatch and Metabiota. The very company we were talking about yesterday, Doc.
Right. So earlier this week, just to recap with our audience, we were actually breaking down the story about Metabiota and its connections in Ukraine. And lo and behold, today, now the Russian chief of radiation, chemical, and biological defenses lays it out. And so according to him, the published correspondence indicates that the true goals of the Pentagon in Ukraine were far from scientific, Rick. It says, thus, in one of the letters, the vice president of Metabiota notes that the company's activities will be aimed at ensuring the cultural and economic independence of Ukraine from Russia. We talked about this the other day as well, which is rather strange for a biotechnology company, the head of those troops said.
So the Russians are wondering, well, why is a biological research company, why are they interested in separating Ukraine from Russia culturally and economically?
Right.
I mean, that's not the purpose of a biological research company. What the Russians are hinting at is Metabiota had a hidden agenda, and they were being funded for a purpose that was not just biological research. Now, we're going to put up on the screen now a image that they showed today at the press conference, and these are quotes from various Hunter Biden emails, and they're showing the Russian news media the timeline of Hunter Biden's involvement in Ukraine in the bio-research labs and companies like Black and Veatch and Metabiota. Well, let's go to the next one.
So the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation published a list of persons who took part in the creation of biological weapons components on the territory of Ukraine. As Kirillov said at the briefing, one of the key figures is Robert Pope, an employee of the U.S. Department of Defense's Defense Threat Reduction Office and director of the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. That's also known as the Nunn-Lugar program, named after Senators Sam Nunn and Senator Richard Lugar from the past. So it goes on to say that he, talking about Pope here, is the author of the idea of creating the central depository of especially dangerous microorganisms in Kiev, Kirillov emphasized. He drew attention to the fact that in his letter to Minister of Health Uliana Suprum, who was a U.S. citizen, according to Tass, Pope highly appreciates the activities of the head of the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, especially noting the access of American specialists to Ukrainian biological objects and the start of work on the formation of a depository of microorganisms. It goes on to say, let me remind you how this activity ended. In accordance with the available information, all pathogenic biomaterials from the storage facility were taken by military transport aircraft to the United States through Odessa in early February 2022, Kirillov said.
Just before the Russian invasion.
Right. And so obviously there was something going on in those labs, Rick.
Well, Doc, if there was nothing dangerous there, why would the United States pack up all the pathogens and bring them to the USA?
And I'm not entirely convinced they got all the pathogens, because Victoria Nuland testified to Congress March the 8th. So that's several weeks, into this week into March, that she was concerned about materials falling into the Russians' hands. Remember her testimony?
That's right.
Before Congress? So obviously the timeline didn't work out for them. Now, according to the Lieutenant General, the coordination of military biological projects in Ukraine and the selection of performance was done by a Joanna Wintrell, head of the DTRA office in Ukraine. He said under her direct supervision, the American projects, UP4, UP6, UP8, were implemented to study deadly pathogens, including anthrax, Crimean Congo fever, and leptospirosis, he said.
But Doc, this is all done under a program under the Pentagon called the Defense Threat Reduction Office. The purpose of the United States being involved in Ukraine, we were told years ago, was to take control of the old Soviet Union laboratories and shut them down.
Right, so they wouldn't fall into the hands of ne'er-do-wells. It might be, rogue elements from the former Soviet Union. That's what we were sold, right?
That's what we were told. But what they were really doing is using that as a cover to build new laboratories and do more experiments.
And they did build new laboratories, and they did do new experiments. And so they were studying a variety of different things in these labs. So I don't know how common Crimean Congo fever is in Ukraine, but it sounds pretty bad, right?
It does.
And so any number of these things, and of course, don't forget that there are several incidences of swine flu outbreaks and other events that occurred in association with some of these labs over the years that were kind of hushed up a little bit.
Yes, but so this threat reduction program was launched in 2005.
Yes.
By now, shouldn't they have reduced the threat?
You would think so.
But actually, the threat is worse.
Yes.
Because they've spent all these years studying deadly pathogens and how to turn them into biological agents. And the Russians are laying this out in detail. And they're connecting Hunter Biden to this operation, which means Joe Biden is involved in it. And this is why there's such a massive cover-up going on in the USA right now with the politicians on both sides, Republican and Democrat.
Right.
The Republicans are not going to pursue this story.
No,
because they're involved in it.
That's right. They're actively involved with it. They're invested in it. And so we've made the connection between Hunter Biden and Rosemont Seneca Capital and their funding of Metabiota. Metabiota has a direct connection to the biolabs in Ukraine. There's several other players involved with this, so follow along with us here. Some of these we talked about earlier this week. Kirillov also focused on the Ukrainian division of Black & Veatch, which is headed by Lance Lippincott. Now, according to him, Lippincott is the main contact person for representatives of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. The company has been working in the interest of the Pentagon since 2008 as part of projects to study potentially dangerous bioagents. Among them is the UP1 project to study rickettsia and tick-borne encephalitis virus in arthropods in northwestern Ukraine. In order to globally control the biological situation during the project UP2, the company implemented a system for remote monitoring of the incidence of tularemia and anthrax at Ukrainian biological facilities, the general said. And so basically he is confirming that these bioagents existed in biolabs in Ukraine during this time under the direct control of a U.S. defense contractor, Black & Veatch. So now he noted that the activities of Black & Veatch company raised many questions, even among Ukrainian special services. In particular, the Kherson department of the SBU drew attention back in 2017 to the fact that the potential threat of worsening of the epidemic situation was actualized due to the intentions of DTRA through Black and Veatch to establish control over the work of microbiological laboratories in Ukraine, conducting research on pathogens of especially dangerous infections. So to translate that, what it simply means is that there was so much that was going on in these biolabs that even the Ukrainian special services were worried about an outbreak that might occur as a result of all the work that's going on. So as Rick pointed out, this was not a reduction of any of these bioagents by any means, but actually an increase, enough that even the Ukrainian special services were concerned that there could possibly be a leak or an outbreak.
Yes, that there was too much going on inside their country.
Yes.
We now know, after years of the Democratic National Committee scandals, the Hillary Clinton email scandals, the Hunter Biden Burisma energy scandal, we now know that very powerful people in the United States of America have been using Ukraine for decades as an outsource for corruption. If you had something crooked, illegal, dirty that you wanted to do, Ukraine was the place to do it.
Right.
It was the wild, wild west. No laws. Take it to Ukraine, set up the operation, and get away with it. And now you have to wonder, what else has been done in Ukraine over the last 20-some years that we didn't know anything about?
Right. Because, I mean, just the biolabs alone is frightening enough. But what else? What are the levels of corruption? And
I really believe the Democratic National Committee servers are in Ukraine.
I believe that too. I really do. And who knows what other information is stored there. So now we get this tie back to Metabiota, and I just find it interesting that we did this extended story the other day on Metabiota and Nathan Wolf, and now we're going into a bit deeper dive here. So Kirillov also said that the issues of biomonitoring and information transfer were supervised by David Mustra, who is closely associated with another Pentagon contractor, Metabiota. Previously, Mustra led military biological projects in Ukraine and Eastern Europe as part of the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, Kirillov said. He stressed that Metabiota is known for its developments in predicting outbreaks of infectious diseases. In addition, it was involved by the Pentagon in modeling the epidemiological situation in post-Soviet space. And went on to say, on the territory of Ukraine, Metabiota was represented by Mary Gutierrez, the vice president of the company and a confidant of Hunter Biden, which is confirmed by the materials of their correspondence. So he also said that Scott Thornton was in charge of the modernization of those laboratories. So we actually had a person on the ground for Metabiota that was living and working in Ukraine.
And reporting to Hunter Biden.
Right. And how do we know? Because we have the emails of Hunter Biden. And we're able to make that direct connection between Hunter Biden and Mary Gutierrez. Yes. They were talking to one another. They were emailing one another. And so there's a direct connection between Hunter Biden and Metabiota.
And if you think the FBI is going to open up an investigation on this scandal, you're really naive, because they have got to work, the FBI is going to work with the CIA and the Pentagon to make sure this is covered up. Because what the Russians are inferring today is Hunter Biden and his father, Joe Biden, were deeply involved in a mega operation to study deadly pathogens in Ukraine that would be used as biological weapons. That's where the Russians are going with it. Right. That's the inference here. This was an outsourcing for biological weapons to be used against Russia. That's what they're inferring.
So when we were talking about the Hunter Biden story a couple years ago, and it seems like the rest of the media is now just discovering all this information now that we were looking at 2 years ago. I thought it was enough then that we're talking about the payoffs, from Burisma and everything, and checks from the Chinese. Rick, this takes it to a whole different level, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, This is the story. Not and as dramatic and awful as the images are on Hunter Biden's laptop with the young women and all the payoffs and everything. That's not the story.
But even Burisma is now small potatoes compared to this story.
Yes. That story is, if anything, it might even serve as a cover for what is really going on here.
And as I mentioned yesterday, Doc, some of the names that we brought up yesterday connected with Metabiota. So Nathan Wolf, the founder of Metabiota, associate friend of Jeffrey Epstein.
Nathan Wolf, the guy who likes to collect blood samples around the world.
Yes, that's his hobby, blood samples. And so he in fact, put Jeffrey Epstein in was it in the foreword of the book?
Yes, as thanking him.
Yes. Along
with the executor of Jeffrey Epstein's estate.
Yes. So yes, that was the other name that was in the book, written by Wolf, the guy that turned out to be the executor of Epstein's estate a day or two after he, committed suicide. Amazing. All these names connected. But also another name was EcoHealth Alliance, which then means DASDAQ. Peter Daszak is involved in it, and Daszak is Anthony Fauci's little boy that he uses to launder money from the National Institute of Health to Wuhan, China. So I would say that there is a very high likelihood that Fauci is involved in the Ukrainian labs. And I'd like to see Senator Rand Paul bring this subject up. I don't know if he will, because
this is too far to go for him.
Yeah, he might have a Madison Cawthorn moment where they trade in secrets. As he said, the currency of Washington is secrets. So I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. This topic may be too hot for even Rand Paul to question Anthony Fauci, because you're now talking about a top secret U.S. government Pentagon operation to use Ukraine to study deadly pathogens. What was the purpose of the studies? Was it to make the world safe? I don't think so. We just went through 2 years of a worldwide plague, and millions of people have died, and hundreds of thousands of businesses worldwide shut down, people's lives disrupted. Why? Because Fauci was involved with China in a lab in Wuhan, or at least we were made to believe that it was done in Wuhan. Perhaps it was taken to Wuhan and released, and then the Chinese blamed. At this point, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that there are psychopaths in the U.S. government and in some of the highest corporations of America, and they're just psychopaths. They want you to believe that they're great, wonderful, outstanding global citizens, diplomats,
right.
Noble men and women seeking to make a better world. The truth is, they're criminal thugs.
Yes.
They're running crime syndicates.
And that's exactly what they are. They're like mafia families.
Yes.
And so, Rick, if the mainstream media ever does mention anything about biolabs, they always mention them in kind of a light way. They're like veterinary centers. We're just helping horses keep from having colds and stuff like that. But even the people involved in Metabiota and their activities in Ukraine, they understood how deadly the pathogens that they were working with were. Now, Kirillov mentioned a Scott Thornton individual that he worked with Metabiota, and it went on to say that Thornton advised local personnel on the handling of especially dangerous pathogens in the framework of Ukrainian DTRA projects. The information received demonstrates the direct involvement of the U.S. military department and their contractors in the planning and implementation of Pentagon projects in Ukraine. And we believe that the listed individuals, listed officials, persons must answer questions about the true goals of this work.
Doc, what Russian Lieutenant General Kirillov is insinuating in these remarks today is the Pentagon was deeply involved
Yes.
in secret work in Ukraine on the border of Russia. Okay, so again, to try to bring it home, to make it easy for Americans to understand, what if we discovered that Russia had 30 biological research labs in Mexico,
Right.
some of them on the border with Texas, and deadly pathogens, the plague, all kinds of deadly pathogens were being stored, researched, multiplied. You have no idea what was going on. And let's say Russia didn't, the United States didn't know for years.
Right.
They had no idea that these laboratories were there. And suddenly it comes out, oh, Russia's been in Mexico for 25 years studying deadly pathogens that could be released into the United States and kill millions of Americans. Right. Would we be upset right now?
Absolutely. I mean, we'd be calling up the military,
would we send the Marines into Mexico to seize those laboratories?
Absolutely. We wouldn't be hitting them with missile strikes, that's for sure. And Russia isn't either. And that's a story that the mainstream media misses as well, that the Russians are actually going in and confiscating the materials. But Rick, I don't even think the Russians knew the full extent of everything that was going on in Ukraine until after their forces moved in. And Kirillov actually kind of confirms this a little bit in his message. He said that the special operation of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine made it possible to stop the activities of 5 Kiev. So just in the city of Kiev, there were 5 Kiev biological labs that were working with anthrax, cholera, and African swine fever. An important result of the special operation of the Russian armed forces was the cessation of the activities of 5 Kiev biological labs, which carried out work with pathogens of anthrax, tularemia, brucellosis, cholera, keep messing up that word, leptospirosis, and African swine fever.
This is around the city of Kyiv.
Right, capital city.
5 biological research labs in or around the city.
Yes.
Who does this kind of stuff?
The U.S. Defense Department, and so because we can't do it here, so we put it somewhere else, that if something does happen, it kills those guys and not us. So according to Kirillov, part of the developments was taken to the United States. The remaining strains were urgently destroyed in accordance with the order of the Ministry of Health of Ukraine dated February 24th.
And that's the day the Russians went in, isn't it? February 24th?
Because they knew the jig was up.
Now we're realizing why they were so worried about a Russian military operation in Ukraine. Because the Russians are going to find evidence of what the U.S. ruling class has been doing in that country. But you're not going to hear it in the news.
No.
What you may hear is Russian propaganda.
And that's what they'll call
misinformation, propaganda, conspiracy theories. And it just happens to be conspiracy theories that involve the Biden family and the Pentagon and possibly Anthony Fauci. So let's go on. We have some more quotes from the story.
Right, so the Chief of Troops also said that the facts of the participation of these laboratories in carrying out work commissioned by the U.S. military department have been confirmed. He said that at one of these bio objects at the Public Health Center of the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, several UP projects were implemented at once with a total funding of more than $30 million, and drew attention to the decision signed by the head of the ethical committee of this center on June 12, 2019, as part of their Project UP8. They had a series of these projects that were in development from UP1 through UP8. So this document testifies to the conduct of studies with an unknown risk to the life and health of participants. So the lab itself was concerned about the risks that was going on to those that were participating in the studies, as well as the concealment of the identity of the subjects. Previously, we cited the research program for this project and involves only a standard blood sampling procedure. The question arises, what kind of life-threatening test are we talking about if the document prescribes that minor incidents with volunteers must be reported to the U.S. Bioethics Committee 72 hours after the incident, and serious ones, including the death of the test subjects, within 24 hours?
Oh, no, this
Yes.
is pretty, this is very, very important, because what the documents that the Russians revealed today are showing that they had a protocol in place for the death of human guinea pigs.
Yes.
Who were the humans that the U.S. was testing?
Well, now, that's a great question, because when I saw this quote today, Rick, what it reminded me of, remember that ad that was posted? I forget which branch of the military posted it, but they were looking for people that would work within, finding the genetic structure of Russians and Ukrainians.
Yes,
and
the
everything
Russians
like that.
were very upset about it.
Right, and I
The
wish I
U.S.
could
the U.S.
find it.
U.S. Army was collecting DNA samples of Russians.
Russian citizens. And I got to think, when we saw the blood sample quote here and everything, that maybe some of the work that they were doing was on Russian citizens from, from different parts of Ukraine, to create a genetic bomb. And so,
or some of the poorest people of Ukraine, or perhaps tests were being carried out in Africa. That's a favorite place. They like to test their biological weapons and their drugs and pharmaceuticals. They like to test them on African children. That's a fact. That's not just me claiming it. It's a fact. This has gone on for years. The pharmaceutical companies, the vaccine companies have done tests on African children.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation
Gates knows about it. But the fact is, they had a protocol in place for the human guinea pigs if some of the human guinea pigs died.
Right.
They weren't bothered that they were going to be dead. They just wanted to make sure their deaths were reported within 24 hours.
Yes.
They didn't care that people died. That was not the...
Just make sure we get the records and the reporting right, because they needed the data.
How cold they are. How did Fauci do his experiments? Well, read Robert F. Kennedy's book. Fauci did he is Dr. Mengele. Fauci did experiments on American orphans. Yeah, he did it. Read Robert F. Kennedy's book about the real Fauci. You'll find out what a slimy man Fauci is. So would they experiment on children? Yeah, they would.
Because they have.
They have.
And they probably are even right now as we speak.
Well, they're conducting experiments right now with the vaccines. They're doing it out in the open. They're telling parents, get your children vaccinated against COVID. It's an experiment. They know what they're doing. Now, Doc.
Yes. Now, so Kirillov, he went on to say, now this is where it gets frightening here. He says, he did not rule out that the official research program is only the visible part of the iceberg, while in practice, volunteers were infected with the Crimean Congo fever virus, hantaviruses, and the causative agent of leptospirosis. Hantaviruses, Rick? That's Black Plague.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's transmitted by mice and rodents. Now, we're about to take another turn in this story. Again, we're presenting to you bits and pieces of information that came out of a Russian military news conference today in Moscow, in which they said, we have the documents, we have the emails, we have the correspondence from Hunter Biden to other people involved in the U.S. government's research of pathogens. We can show you Hunter Biden's connection to the laboratories in Ukraine. So we're going to take a deeper turn at this point into what the Russians were saying, because General Kirillov said that the Ukrainian government was developing the technical means for the delivery and use of biological weapons for possible use against the Russian Federation. Now, this is the specific information he mentioned.
So Kirillov drew attention to the request of the Ukrainian company Motorcycle to the Turkish manufacturer of unmanned aerial vehicles, Bayraktar. I want to emphasize that this document is dated December 15th, 2021. Its essence is it possible to equip this UAV with systems and mechanisms for spraying aerosols with a capacity of more than 20 liters, with a flight range of such a UAV of up to 300 kilometers, and equipping containers with biological formulations? A real threat of large-scale use is created biological weapons on the territory of the Russian Federation, the head of the troops said. So, according to this document that Kirillov is pointing out, that Turkish-made drones, the plan was to use these drones to deliver biological pathogens not on Russian troops in Ukraine, but in Russia.
Yes, they wanted to know from the manufacturer, could these drones carry 20 liters of a liquid containing pathogens, and could they travel 300 kilometers to spray the pathogens over, over troops? Doc, I think about the chemtrails that had been sprayed over Americans since the 1990s.
Right.
What is it? I mean, people think, oh, the U.S. government wouldn't spray us with anything. Look, right here is evidence. They're looking for drones to spray deadly substances on humans.
And at this time, Rick, they were already receiving drones from Turkey, and they are to this time. Turkey, a NATO member, has been giving drones of this capacity, of this size. Whether they deliver biological weapons or not, that's another story. But these types of drones have already been delivered to Ukraine.
That's right. And the general wanted to make it known. He pointed to the date, December 15, 2021, just months ago.
Right.
Is when this correspondence was sent to the Turkish defense contractor.
So the Ukrainians and the American handlers were asking the question, listen, can we deliver a biological pathogen on Russian territory? Mind you, Russia had not entered Ukraine at this point. It was still 2 months away from that.
But the Ukrainian military was getting ready to deliver biological attacks on Russia.
Yes.
And yet, what were they saying? What was the Biden White House, the Pentagon, and all the other, the media apparatus? We have intelligence that Putin is going to launch a chemical attack on the Ukrainian people.
Right.
No, Ukraine was going to launch a biological attack on the Russians.
And the Russians got to the labs first.
Yes.
So, well, according to Kirillov, an unmanned aerial vehicle also has been patented in the United States.
Wait till you hear this.
To spread infected insects in the air.
You want to read that again?
Yeah. According to Kirillov, an unmanned aerial vehicle has also been patented in the United States to spread infected insects in the air. The patent description states that with this device, enemy troops could be destroyed or disabled without risk to U.S. military personnel. Now, Rick, you've been doing True News in variations for more than 2 decades.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of a drone delivering infected insects before?
Not as a drone, but I definitely have heard of the U.S. military testing aerosols on Americans.
But infected insects? This is a new one on me. Spraying wide areas with insects infected with a virus.
Okay, so asking, do I know about the U.S. military? No. But the topic I've discussed for quite some time, going back to West Nile virus, 1999. Right. I was the first radio program, other than local news in New York. I was the first national reporter to report about West Nile virus. And I did a lot of research on it. This happened in July of 1999. I'd only been on the air since May.
Right.
And I thought it was so strange that this West Nile virus, encephalitis, was in New York City.
Yes.
And it just happened that the first reports were about a week or two after a United Nations meeting in which a Cuban delegation attended. And where I went with this is I found out that Fidel Castro had a morbid fascination with infecting insects with viruses. Most people don't know that Cuba has a major biological warfare research laboratory in Havana. Cuba is in the forefront of biological warfare research, and Castro had a fascination with infected insects. He wanted to infect insects and release them in the United States. I believe West Nile virus was brought to the U.S. by Cuban agents who came in with the delegation to go to the UN meeting.
Right.
And it was we didn't have West Nile virus in America.
And isn't it strange that it was in New York City, of all places, West Nile virus?
Mm-hmm.
How's it show up in Manhattan?
In a park, yes.
And so in Central Park. And so so that kind of lends some credence here to this idea that there could be an insect delivery program. But apparently there's a patent on this too. That, you know, they have actually a patented device that does this.
Who patents a weapon to spray diseased insects over a population of people, that not only military, but there's going to be civilians there? Who does this kind of stuff?
Yeah, and this is supposed to be part of the biological threat reduction program. They're just finding new and better ways of delivering
to kill people.
Biological threats.
Yes.
So, well, other patents show various types of ammunition for the delivery of chemical and biological formulations. Their description notes the characteristics: low specific cost of destruction and no need for contact with enemy manpower. So this corresponds with what Washington is implementing the concept of non-contact warfare, Kirillov said, noting that such shells can be equipped with capsules with poisonous, radioactive, narcotic substances, as well as pathogens of infectious diseases. Now, Kirillov said the U.S. considers developing countries as a testing ground for components of biological weapons and medicines. The disdainful attitude toward the citizens of Ukraine characterizes well the pragmatic approach of the U.S. to the organization of military biological research. Developing countries are viewed as a testing ground for testing components of biological weapons and medicines, he said. And we've talked about that quite a bit. So
this information is not going to be seen or heard in the USA. You can just count on it. This is an exclusive report. I hope you share this episode of True News with as many people as possible. Put it on all the social media that you can. It'll get deleted on a lot of platforms. Just put it back up again. Just make them work at censoring this report, all right? Keep them busy, for days censoring True News. But we need you to get this information out. Please send this episode of True News to all of your friends and coworkers. Get it out on social media and tell people you have to watch this entire program. This is exclusive information that will not be reported in the United States of America because it implicates the Biden family in a criminal operation to produce biological weapons in Ukraine. And so a lot of the crime that the crime syndicate in America has been doing has been done in Ukraine. And that's why the Clintons and the Bidens and Obama and others are so fond of doing things in Ukraine. It is a cesspool for corruption. Now,
apparently, the U.S. wasn't the only one in the Ukrainian playground, right, Rick?
No, the Russians also released today information about another Western country that was also conducting biological research in Ukraine.
So Germany apparently was conducting its own military biological program in Ukraine, said Gennady Gatilov, Russia's permanent representative to the UN Geneva office. So it is appropriate to note that the documents confirm the fact that Germany is implementing its own military biological program in Ukraine, he said at the plenary session of the Conference on Disarmament. Now, according to Gatilov, the purpose of the program was to study the potential of deadly diseases, such as Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, in the conditions of Eastern Europe. Kirillov also noted that the project was funded by the German Foreign Ministry and the Bundeswehr. And so,
Okay, Doc, I have something involving this. Goes back to the beginning of the Russian-Ukraine war.
okay.
There's a story that we reported. I found a story that day that the chief of the German CIA, the German intelligence
I remember that
agency.
story.
So I found the story that he was stranded in Ukraine. The war had broke out.
Right.
His jet flew back to Germany. His private jet flew back to Germany, but they left the chief of the German, intelligence agency behind. And what you said, Doc, you hit it. All right, so we were sitting here on True News. We were talking about the story. Like, isn't that bizarre that the jet takes off without the chief of the German intelligence agency? They left a guy behind. And you said perhaps what was on the jet was so important that he had to stay behind. Now we know what was on the plane. Now we know what was on the plane. The pathogens. The German pathogens.
And the documentation.
And he couldn't get on the plane. It was too dangerous. And I bet the pilots.
Wow.
I bet the pilots were in hazmat suits.
Wow, Rick. I'm actually very impressed that you made that leap. I mean, that's awesome. That's the only explanation. Why would you leave? That'd be like leaving our CIA director behind in a war zone.
But you're the one that day who said, hey, wait, Rick, maybe the story is what was on the plane so important that they left the chief behind.
Or what was being put on the plane was so deadly, they had to leave the chief behind.
We didn't think about it at that time.
Wow.
They found
hey,
guys, thank you. Look at that. Wall Street Journal. What's the date on that? February 25th, the day
after the Russians moved in.
German spy chief stranded in Ukraine amid Russian attack.
What a strange headline to read. His own jet took off without him.
Now we know why. Let's go back to number 24, and this tells us why the German spy chief was stranded.
Germany implemented its own biological program in Ukraine.
So they loaded up that plane with all of the deadly pathogens and the records.
As much as they could.
As much evidence as they could stuff in that plane. There were no seats for him to sit on, and it was too dangerous for him to get in the plane.
But obviously they didn't get all the documents because the Russians found some.
Yes.
And Gennady Kirillov brought it out in the open today. And so,
hey,
wow, that's awesome, Rick. I hadn't even considered that.
I got one more story on Ukraine and Hunter Biden. CBS News, wow, they're really coming up in the world. They have discovered that the Hunter Biden laptop is real. This is late-breaking news over CBS News. They've got a scoop on this story.
2 years old for us.
Yeah, and they want you to know that they're on top of this story, and they put out this report about Hunter Biden.
We also have new information this morning about an ongoing investigation into President Biden's son, Hunter. Federal officials are looking at his foreign business dealings, including his ties to a Chinese energy company. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge is in Washington. She's been following this for us. Catherine, good morning.
Good morning, Tony. The investigation began as a tax inquiry years ago and has expanded into a federal probe involving the FBI and IRS. A source familiar with the investigation now tells CBS News 2 men who worked with Hunter Biden when his father was vice president were called to the grand jury last fall.
Multiple sources tell CBS News that the federal investigation into Hunter Biden's business practices is broader than previously known. The probe is exploring whether the younger Biden and his associates violated tax, money laundering, and foreign lobbying laws. Records reviewed by CBS News and documents released by Republicans in Congress indicate multiple financial transactions involving an energy company called CEFC. Republicans accuse the business of being an arm of the Chinese government. In 2017, the year Joe Biden left the vice presidency, a $1 million retainer was signed with a Chinese energy company for Hunter Biden's services as a lawyer. His client, a CEFC official, Patrick Ho, was later convicted on international bribery and money laundering charges for unrelated work in Africa.
Here you have Hunter Biden.
This week on the Senate floor, Republican Chuck Grassley presented financial records that he said showed six-figure payments from the Chinese energy company to Hunter Biden's firm.
This is $100,000 from what is effectively an arm of the Communist Chinese government direct to Hunter Biden.
Allegations about Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings reached a fever pitch during the 2020 campaign.
Where's Hunter?
And on Tuesday, former President Trump pushed an unproven claim about Hunter Biden's business dealings in Russia, calling on Vladimir Putin to release any damaging information.
I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it.
This was the response from the White House.
What kind of American, let alone an ex-president, thinks that this is the right time to enter into a scheme with Vladimir Putin?
An attorney for Hunter Biden did not respond to CBS News regarding his business dealings. Last year, he told correspondent Anthony Mason on CBS This Morning that the president did not financially benefit.
Have you ever given your father money from any of your business ventures?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Directly or indirectly?
Directly or indirectly.
The White House declined to comment on the record and referred reporters to an earlier statement that President Biden has never considered being in business with his family or any business overseas, Gail.
Well, I'm glad we have that cleared up.
Boy.
I was worried there for a while, Doc.
Well, it's all going to turn out in the end, Rick.
You know, I would swear that we talked about this 2 years ago.
We did talk about it 2 years ago, Rick.
Sounds so familiar to stuff we talked about. Now CBS, they beat us to it, Doc.
To see Chuck Grassley, though, stand up with a big old white, visual display there and everything. Look, here's money that got transferred from CEFC to Hunter Biden. We talked about this 2 years ago. So that very transaction.
CBS said in that report, all right, we have this, we have this scoop. We have this important. They said late breaking. We have this new information about Hunter Biden. He's under investigation. And then they tell you that he's under investigation for tax evasion and
money laundering.
And then they go, but several days ago, Donald Trump made unproven claims against Hunter Biden's business. Unproven, then why is he being investigated? But I want to tell you one other thing. I don't know if you picked it up in that story. Days ago, President Trump called on Vladimir Putin to release information about Hunter Biden.
Yes.
They did it today, Doc.
Yes.
That's what we just reported. That military press conference today was Russia responding to Donald Trump saying, if you've got information on Hunter Biden, cough it up. They coughed it up today. That's why you're only going to hear it today on True News, because Fox News, CNN, Washington Post, Wall Street, nobody's going to touch it. It's not going to get reported. You've got to get this True News episode out to everybody. One more thing, and hey, before I do want to encourage people, the book, Final Day, this is the second edition. Man, thousands of you are ordering this book, and we are shipping them out as fast as we can. This is the 10 characteristics of the Lord's second coming. There's not a book like it. I've said it many times, this is not a book about the last days. It is a book about the very last day. What goes down when Jesus comes down? That's what this book is about. The noise, the disruption, the sight, all of it. I describe it in this book. What happens on the day Jesus Christ comes back? The book is available for $19.95 plus shipping. And for those of you who can give a $100 donation or more, I will personally autograph your book. Would be very honored to do it, and many of you have asked for it. So go to truenews.com, click the banner at the top of our page, and order the book. Now, one more thing. we'll go back in time a few years, 2 years, and we'll take a look. Here's a Fox News report from November. Oh, this was just a year ago.
Yes.
November 17, 2021.
All right, so this is Representative Boebert bringing up once again the Eric Swalwell story about his relationship with a certain Chinese woman that apparently was likely a spy.
Yes, a Chinese spy. And so we're talking about Eric Swalwell, Democrat congressman from California, who just happens to be on the House Intelligence Committee that has access to all of the top secrets of the U.S. government.
Now, this relationship was several years ago.
Yes,
okay.
It came out in 2020.
Right.
Eric Swalwell had some type of intimate, special relationship with this Chinese spy.
Right.
And her name was Fang Fang.
Right.
Remember Fang Fang?
Yes.
We had a lot of jokes about what Swalwell was doing with Fang Fang.
And apparently this relationship actually occurred back in 2016, 2017, okay? And that's
so,
important to the timeline here. We'll explain here in just a few moments.
Yeah, so I'm going to skip down now to number 31.
Okay.
Now, this, Doc showed this to me today, and I'm like, what is the connection to Eric Swalwell?
Okay.
This is New York Times, no survivors found in China Eastern crash. This was the horrible airliner crash last week in China. Everybody died. Everybody.
Right. Yes, 132 people lost their lives in this particular crash. At least that's what's being reported. This was back on March the 22nd. Now, this wasn't a story that got a lot of attention around the world.
But there was a video of the jet falling from the sky.
Right, an explosion, fireball, and all that related to it. But it just didn't seem to, catch on as a major story. Rick always had a rule that always ask, when you hear about a plane crash, ask who was on that plane. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Because you can go back to the Titanic.
Right. Or the Malaysian jet over the South Indian Ocean. There were...
Still haven't figured that one out, have they?
But there were a lot of people that were involved in genetics and everything that were on that plane at the same time. Same thing with the Ukraine flight that got knocked down
Doc,
a couple years ago.
Who was on this China Eastern airliner that crashed last week?
All right, so let's kind of walk our audience through this here. So the China Eastern Airlines plane, flight MU-5735, had plunged 29,000 feet in the air to Earth on Monday in Ting County. This was last week in the region of Guangxi, burning debris across a remote countryside. Now, at the crash site, workers found parts of the plane as well as personal belongings, such as identity cards, purses, and cell phones, news reports said. So the United States government and Beijing both offered to send investigators to help in analyzing the cause of the China Eastern crash. Chinese state media has noted the offer without saying whether China will accept it. Officials said Tuesday, remember this is last week, the plane actually crashed on Monday, the 21st, that there were no foreign passengers on the plane. Made a big deal about that. The airline said that it has contacted the families of all 132 people and assembled a group of experts to help work with relatives. Now, this is where the turn happens. So, in this entire New York Times article, they only mention one passenger on this plane. So by Monday afternoon, the identity of one of the passengers missing and most likely dead emerged. Fang Fang, the chief financial officer of Dinglong Culture, a mining and resources company in Yunnan province where the flight began. Her company said that she was on the flight, but denied rumors that 6 other company managers were also on it. So,
is it the Fang Fang?
Well, Rick, that's really the question. Now, this particular Fang Fang, up until a few days ago, you could go back and look at her profile on Dinglong Culture, where she started working there in 2018. This would have been after the episode period of time with Swalwell.
Was there a photograph of her?
No, because you can't find this now.
Well, somebody should call Eric Swalwell's office and ask if this is his girlfriend.
Or, express their condolences to him, because obviously they had some sort of relationship.
Yeah,
right?
we could send roses and flower bouquets to Eric Swalwell.
So-
Your girlfriend died in that horrible crash.
So, Rick, here's what got me about this article in the New York Times. Now, this New York Times article was obviously written with information that was given directly to them from the Chinese government, right? Would you assume so?
Yes.
So the Chinese government made a decision to release information that a woman named Fang Fang died in this wreck. Okay?
132 people died,
Right.
but they only mentioned one.
And they made sure that the Western media knew that name, Fang Fang.
So
So
New
Rick-
York Times of all
Right.
newspapers.
So New York Times was the first to come out with the story. Several other outlets now have it as well. So Rick, what's going on here? What do you think is happening here? Did Fang Fang die in that wreck?
Or is she about to die?
Somewhere else.
Because the New York Times pre-published in advance the death of General Soleimani of Iran.
Right.
His death was actually in a news article in the New York Times before he died in Iraq. The New York Times knew he was going to die, and they published that Soleimani was going to die in...
Or that he had died.
Or he had died.
Yes.
Okay? So maybe Fang Fang's being told, you're going to die. Or maybe she has died, and they're planning the story. Well, Doc, think about this. Republicans take over the House. Okay, Swalwell's kicked off of the House Intelligence Committee. They open up investigations into Swalwell and Fang Fang.
Right.
Well, you can't bring Fang Fang in if she's dead.
Right. So this, of all the names they could have mentioned there, they mentioned the one that connected to Eric Swalwell and the story.
And I bet they found her driver's license and passport, just like the FBI found
the 9/11
yes.
passports. You know, the stuff they find, you can't find the body, but you can find...
Well, look at this. Driver's license,
Hey,
Fang
look,
Fang.
and her cell phone, too. What do you know? We got all this information. Something stinks, and it doesn't smell right at all. I don't know if it's the same Fang Fang or not, but the New York Times published that name, and they were given that information by the Chinese government.
And it wasn't like they published a complete passenger list to say all 132 people, here's 132 people who died. If you have any relatives in America, here they are. No, as you said, they made sure the New York Times got one name, Fang Fang.
And what was even more interesting is the crash occurred Monday. By Monday afternoon, they had released that name. Not later on, the same day.
Same day.
So it was really, it's weird. Who knows? We may find the answer someday.
Was that jet brought down because Fang Fang was on it?
Well, that's the question. Maybe she was trying to leave China or trying to figure her way out or something like that.
Don't think.
And how do
come
you
on, Rick. A government would not shoot down a commercial jetliner to kill one person. Oh, yes, they would.
They threatened to do it to Yasser Arafat.
There you go. That's the one I was going to say. Ariel Sharon wanted to shoot down a commercial airliner that had children on board, just innocent passengers, because Yasser Arafat was on that plane. And to the credit of the Israeli military, they refused to do it. But the point is, the prime minister of Israel was ordering them to shoot down the airliner, kill everybody on board, because he hated Arafat and he wanted him dead. So governments do this kind of stuff. Yes, it's possible that, and it doesn't mean China did it.
That's right, and that's what I was going to ask.
It can mean that somebody that wants to make sure the American connections to Fang Fang and Chinese spies, perhaps they did it.
Tie up all the loose ends.
Yeah.
So.
Or it's just bad luck for Fang Fang.
I don't believe in bad luck.
Yeah,
I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah,
I don't
either,
believe that they accidentally put the Fang Fang name in the New York Times article.
That's right.
They were transmitting that information to an English audience and making sure you knew who died.
Because a year from now, and there's an investigation into Swalwell. Sorry. We reported a year ago, Fang Fang died. She died in March of 2022. And you just can't serve a subpoena on her because she's in the grave, you know? Okay, that's it for today. Again.